Welcome to Powerless Penguins United Big Book Study. This week I'm happy to reintroduce MAGS, who's come along to continue with the book study. Over to you, MAGS.
Thank you for your service. Morning, everybody in the background, all the readers and all the rest of the crew. My name is MAGS and I'm an alcoholic. Great to be here again on a Saturday morning. And God only knows where this is going to go this morning, because there's all sorts of everything jumping into my mind. And in the midst of it all, a couple of people needing help before we even come on to the meeting. So it's all good this morning. Everybody's kicking into action first thing. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here as always. And I am so delighted to be in step 8 and 9. Like literally delighted to be in step 8 and 9. This is just, I've actually been thinking about this for a number of weeks. It's like, oh my God, we've really got into this. We've worked this through and we're now at this really beautiful, I want to say pivotal point, because it really is. And this is another one, step 8 and 9, I think, from my own experience of being in the rooms. Step 8 and 9 are another couple of those steps where we put the fear of God into people, especially the newcomer, about, oh my God, when you do your amends, oh my God, when you do your amends, wait till you get to your amends, without actually helping them understand that there's a process before you get to step 8. You know, the importance of that set aside prayer for the rest of our lives. But as we sit here this morning, or if you're listening at another time, we genuinely have to ask for the power of that prayer. You know, we're asking God to set aside every single thing we think we know about our illness, about God, about what's going to keep us sober, so that we may have a new experience with God and that we may be shown the truth. That's what this is about. You may not be at this point in your steps. You may not have ever gotten to this point in your steps. You may not even have a sponsor yet. But even so, if you're listening to this, set aside every single thing you think you know, because it's not going to serve you well. If we go into this with a closed mind at this point, I might jump around a little bit in relation to this, but let's just go with the flow of it, because there's nothing else that I can do this morning. So for me, this is a beautiful transition place, I think, is how I would explain it. Last week, we covered step 6 and 7, those two little paragraphs that cover so much and really do truly pack a punch in what they show us and teach us about our willingness to have God take away all of those things that we identified that were objectionable as we went through those inventories. Were we willing for God to take them all? Were we ready for God to take them all? And if we weren't ready for God to take them all, that we pray for the willingness for him to do so. That's your step 6. And then as we move into 7, when I was ready, my sponsor let me go off and say my 7-step prayer when I was ready. Because the reality of it is, when I say that prayer and ask God to remove every single defect of character that is standing in my way of my usefulness to him and to my fellows, when I say that prayer and I say that amen, I need to be ready. which means for immediate use. Because as soon as we say that prayer, God's doing his work. God's done his work. The defects are removed. We move on. Amen. Done, dusted. Step 7, now completed. Because as we move through the rest of the steps into these 8 and 9 and do these amends, and then into 10, 11 and 12, we're given a set of tools in our spiritual toolkit to continue to do things as we go through life. Okay? And that will make more sense when we get into those steps. You know, I always say we grow where we're planted. You know, in 6, we talked about those defects of character. The defects of character are the things that we lack. We talked about this in step 5. The nature of our defects. Those are the things that we lack. I think I might have explained it previously. If not, I'll just say it now. You know, this lack of power is our dilemma. It tells us on page 45. Lack of power is our dilemma. Our human frailties have failed us utterly. And if lack of power is our dilemma, then where are we to find that power? Well, that's exactly the purpose of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. This book allows us, enables us, gives us the power to gain access to the God of our own understanding. That's what this is all about. And if I had a car, which I don't need one. If I had a car and on the dashboard a little warning light comes up, more often than not that little warning light is telling me that there's a defect with the car. Whether that be with the engine, whether that be with the oil, whether that be with the lights, I don't know. I'm not a car person. But if I see a light come up on the dashboard, there's something not right in the car that needs to be looked at. There's a defect. And I have to take it to a mechanic to do something about that defect. Okay, so ordinarily when I take it to the mechanic, he'll identify the defect. He'll identify that there's a lack of something in the car, a lack of water, a lack of air, a lack of oil, and he'll pour something else in to get rid of the defect. He'll top it up with oil. He'll top it up with water. He'll top it up with air, or he'll do something else magical. I don't know. This is very baseline mechanics here I'm talking about, but I think you get the drift of this example. And if you don't, call me, because I'm not going to spend too much time explaining it all again, because it's probably not going to make any sense anyway. But the mechanic identifies the defect, there's a lack of, and pours something else in to top it up, the defect is removed. That's exactly what happens with me in my 6 and 7 with the power. Through my 4th step inventories, going into my step 5, I've identified those things that are objectionable, where I have a lack of power. I need more God to be poured in to get rid of the defect. That's what happens in step 7. I say that's 7-step prayer, more God is poured in. The defect is removed. Anytime I have a lack of something or something crops up that is objectionable, I'm asking for the power of God to come in to fill me up with more God. The defect is removed and I move on. That's how the process just works in a very simple way. For me anyway. And people will often talk about, the difference between the shortcomings and defects. Don't get into too much of that. Bill W. just chose a different word to keep us interested. He didn't like to use the same word twice. He used the same phrases a couple of times, which we'll point out in the next paragraph what we're going into. But, two steps in a row, we just wanted to mix it up a little bit. Don't be going into too much detail around that. There's a great speaker. I was speaking to Julian during the week, and there's a great speaker. If you haven't heard him, it's Scott L. from Nashville. If you haven't heard his recordings on step 9, get them. Honestly, a fantastic experience with the power greater than yourself if you hear him talk about step 9. Real, beautiful, heart, mind stuff. Really powerful. And I learned a lot from him and his experience, and he has guided me a great deal with regards to how to approach this and how to understand it from the perspective that hopefully we're going to talk through today. So the defects he's taught me, my sponsors taught me, are this lack of power, these shortcomings. A lovely way to look at it, I think, these shortcomings are the things that I know I should have done and didn't. Those little things where you knew it was the right thing to do, but you didn't do it because you were probably afraid of the consequences, or you were too embarrassed or whatever. So you knew you had to do something about it, but you fell short. So that's another one just to throw in there, different kind of thinking of those people on that list that you've made in your inventory. And, in any given day, I can fall short. I have shortcomings. But what our program of action and our program recovery does is gives us the spiritual tools to be able to rectify those things as we go along. But right now, what we're doing is ascertaining all of these things from the past that we've identified in our inventories that we need to go out and amend, those things that we need to alter, those things that we need to make good, those things that we need to change. Okay? But the perspective from which we're looking at this, when we reach step 9, when we reach step 8, the lens through which we're looking at this when we reach this point is entirely different from the beginning of the process at step 1. And what I mean by that is that if you have got to this point in the process with your sponsor and you've worked through each of those steps, you are already becoming a different person. You're not the same person as you were at step 1. You're going to be seeing, like it says in the bottom paragraph on page 66, as you move into your step 4, you're prepared to look at this from an entirely different angle. When you get to step 8 and 9, there's a lot of information that has been given to you that you have unearthed through your 4th and 5th step process. You've then had the willingness and were ready with it for immediate use for God to remove those defects of character. And now you stand at this point where you are going to move forward. You're going to continue to move this energy. That's why it says, now we need more action. When Laws called out the paragraph that we were going to be covering this morning and he read those first few words, now more action, I got this giddy little giggle. It's like, now we need more action. Oh, yeah, we do. Because I remember when I was with my sponsor and I got to page 8, the people that listen to this or the people that know me, you know how I adore this gentleman who is my sponsor, and that is not, I don't idolize him in the sense of I know he's a human being. Do you know what I mean? But this man is just the most adorable person who has given me life. And I know it's not him that does it. I know that it's God. But you know that I talk about some of the little things that I experienced with him as I was going through the process. That I thought he was a builder, and it turns out that he was a salesperson, because he used to use all those masonry terms and all of those builders terms. And he used to, when we got to certain points in the book, say the line and look up at me and kind of smile, because he wanted to see my reaction. And ordinarily my reaction was, it's like, seriously. So he took much joy in saying, well, Mags, how are you today? Let's get stuck in. Now we need more action. And I'm like, you little blue. He took great pleasure in knowing that I needed more action, because I was delighted with myself when I got to this point. I needed a gold medal, all of those gold stars. I needed the sponsee of the year award, because Mags, had arrived at step 8. So proud of myself. My head was the size of Ireland. And then he pops that little helium balloon, pop, deflated, Mags, now, more action. And with that, I took a breath, and underneath my breath was calling him all sorts of everything. But he reminded me, Mags, there's a few things, because we need to continue with this willingness. We need to continue with this honesty. We need to continue with this open-mindedness for the rest of our lives. Remember we talked about that? Yes, sir, I do. And at that point, I go quiet and I start to tune in and listen to what he has to say. So now we need more action. So here we go, which we find, without which we find faith without works is dead. That ain't the first time you've heard that. In fact, that's the second time in the book you've heard that. The first time we hear it is on page 14 in Bill's story. As we're coming to the end of Bill's story, when we're in his step 12 experience, it talks about the very bottom of page 14, that beautiful line. Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice with others, he could not survive the certain trials and those spots ahead. If he did not work, if he did not do the work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it is just like that. So this, on page 14, is talking about step 12. It's talking about the importance of intensive work, one alcoholic with another. It's talking about the importance that when we have a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, my job is to work intensively, one alcoholic with another, and to sponsor people, to give this away for them to be able to get the solution. That's what it's referring to on page 14. But they're reminding us now in step 8, faith without works is dead. You've done all of this work up to this point, right? You've got to step 8. But do not think that that's the job done. And like Mags in her naivety, that you're going to get a gold star for this. Yeah, good for you. Good for you. But this is just the beginning. And don't be afraid of that. Don't be put off by that, please. It's so incredibly important to know that. As you continue through the rest of the steps, you're going to be given more tools, more spiritual tools in that spiritual toolkit that's laid at your feet for you to continue to be able to keep on taking the action for the rest of our lives. Don't be put off by it. It becomes this way of living, as it says in the next paragraph in Bill's story on page 15. This design for living. And on page 15, he's talking about this design for living, that being sponsorship, that when I have a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, I become able then to give this away to more people. That's our purpose. That's our job. And if you're already in step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, and you're not sponsoring, I don't know what you're doing. Get to it. That's our purpose. That's what we're here for. So faith without works is dead. I just love that they drop a little reminder. They don't let us forget anything. So they've mentioned that at step 1. They're now mentioning it and reminding us at step 8. And they also remind us a third time at the end of this chapter, right before we move into step 12. They're clever, these people that wrote this book, aren't they? They know how we operate. They know how we think. They never let us forget. And that is a very, very beautiful thing. So let's look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. There's that word again. And you might be saying, oh, where is that list? Well, yeah, that's your list from your step 4 inventory, your step 5 long talk conversation. We made it when we took inventory. Now here is a really important point. if your sponsor does this little thing that sometimes I hear people talk about after someone has completed their step 4 or their step 5, they do this little ritual where they decide that you should burn your inventory as a way of cleansing your soul of all of the bad things that you've done in your life. Think again, my friends. There's no moon ritual, burning ritual, sacrificial ritual from your step 4 or step 5. Burning your list that is going to be helpful for you. And with all due respect, if you're into all of those rituals and moons and water and all of that and bringing in the new moon, brilliant. I do that stuff too sometimes, you know, the astrology and it's all God-given, all of this stuff. But see, when it comes to your 4th step inventory, you hold on to that list because you need it. You need it for step 8. You need it for step 9. You need it for going out and taking this action. Faith without works is dead. Because if you're sitting at this point with 8 and 9 with no list as to who you're going to talk to and what amends you need to make and who you're willing to make amends to, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Going to get a bit tricky. Yeah. I can see everybody laughing on the screen. I can see people covering their faces. I can see people rolling their eyes. But you know that it's true. We hear this stuff, you know, and people are really proud about the fact, you know, after I achieved it, I burnt my list and that was the end. Well, good for you, because my sponsor would have very firm words to say to me if I fancied going out and burning that list and sending it up into the atmosphere. Hold on to your list, because as it says here, we need it. We made this list. We have this list of people whom we have harmed and we're willing to make amends to it, make amends to them. We had subjected ourselves to this drastic self-appraisal. It felt really drastic, didn't it, in step 4 when we were going through all of those inventories? Our resentment inventory, our fear inventory, our sex inventory. It felt pretty drastic, didn't it? I remember listening to an AA speaker and they talked about, they were really into the definitions and everything. You don't need to know the context of why I was with this person, what we were doing and all of that. But we were going through the steps in it with a group of people. And he was the kind of facilitator bringing us all through it. And he gave us the definition of drastic. And I thought, oh God, this is going a bit far. But actually, when you think about it now, it kind of makes sense. A drastic self-appraisal. Apparently, back in the 1600s, the word drastic means an evacuation of the bowels. I was like, oh God, that's interesting. So your 4th step and your 5th step inventory does feel like a complete and utter evacuation of your bowels. You know, like it says at the bottom of page 73, I think it is. 72, where it says, you know, we've got to get rid of this stuff. You know, we had that thing about we pooped it all out. It is pretty drastic. We are getting rid of all of this stuff. We want it to be taken away. So we have subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now we go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. So in my step 8, we made a list of the people, like it says on page 59, in the short form, we made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So with my drastic self-appraisal and all of those people on that list, my sponsor gave me this action. Before I moved into step 9, I had to go back to that list. Thank God I hadn't burned it, because I would be in a really difficult position at this point. He asked me to go through that list and he said to me, Identify who you are currently willing to make amends to. Identify who you're not so sure about, and identify those ones that you are not willing to make amends to. He sent me off to do that exercise, right? And I had to bring it into this prayerful exercise. God, help me be willing. God, you're constantly asking for the willingness as you're going through this. I then came back, and in this process, I had a list of the people who I was prepared to make the amends to. And then he said, great, we'll start there. The ones you're not so sure about, and the ones you're definitely not, keep on asking for the willingness. Keep on praying for the willingness, because you will be making amends to every single one of these people. But where we're going to start is the ones that you're willing to. And what also to be reminded of here is there's no small amends. There's no big amends. An amends is an amends. Okay? What we went for in the first instance was the low-hanging fruit. Those people who I knew where they were in the world that I could get in touch with and who I was willing. Low-hanging fruit. It wasn't that I was going to wait for the willingness for everybody on my list to come. I started the process. I took the action. Even if I was only willing to make amends to 5 at that point, I started with the 5. And as I was doing those 5, I continued to pray for the willingness. And then all of a sudden I was on this trajectory of knowing who I needed to speak to, making the arrangements, taking the action. There was no stone left unturned. Seriously. Oh, I haven't seen that person in 5 years. Find them. And there's no shortage of ways to find people in this world now, whether that be Facebook, any sort of social media, etc., etc. I went out on this mission. This was the action. But we started with the low-hanging fruit. Those people that were nearby, my family in particular, were the ones. Was I willing to do it? No, I wasn't really. I was terrified of this step. Terrified. And I'll explain the reasons why. Well, I was just terrified. But the reality of it is the clear-cut directions help us work this all through. Remember, we're not the same person as we were at the beginning of this process. And the reality of it is also we are not doing this by ourselves. Remember, in our 7-step prayer, it says, grant me the strength to do your bidding. I'm asking the power, the God of my understanding, to give me his strength in order for me to have the strength to do his work well. Remember our step 3 promises on page 63? Our little plans and designs no longer matter. Our fear inventory, we are here to play the role that he assigns. I'm here to do God's work well. I'm not doing this by myself. And to make amends is to try to alter, to try to change. But the reality of it is, I keep saying that word reality. Sorry for repeating myself. The next piece in the paragraph says, we attempt to sweep away the debris which accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. All of this build-up of stuff is our own self-will. We're not doing this anymore by ourselves. We've got this power that is running in and through us. We made that decision in step 3 to turn our will and our life over. We've turned it over through that process from 3 through 7. Now we're going out to take the action. And if we haven't the will to do this, we ask until it comes. But there's already stuff that we can start to get on with. Because here's the other little thing. And again, my sponsor's like, Mags, do you remember? The next line, remember, it was agreed at the beginning, and this is in italics, we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. And my sponsor looked up at me and said, do you remember that you agreed to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol? And me being the smart ass that I was like, yeah, of course I did. And then he said, well, when did you agree? And I thought, you seriously? Yeah, I did agree to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. And this is where it's reminding me of that. I first agreed that I was prepared to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol right back before I went into step 3. On page 58, it set out, if you've decided that you want what we have, i.e. if you want what the first 100 people that wrote this book had, which was freedom from alcohol, which was freedom from the bondage of themselves, if you want that, and you've decided that you want that, and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. The same applies here as we move from step 8 into step 9. Remember, you agreed to go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. So if that's what you've agreed, here's what you've got to do. Isn't that amazing? That little gentle reminder as we go through, they never let us forget. This is why it's so incredibly important to do this work with a sponsor, because they won't let you miss things like this. They keep reminding us about those things that we need to do. And it's great to have those gentle reminders about what we have to do. Now note that for victory over alcohol, because as we move through this amends process, the reason why we're doing it alters. And it's so incredibly powerful. But right now, this is just a little reminder. You agreed right back before you made that decision at step 3 that you were prepared to go for any lengths for victory over alcohol. So that's what we're doing here. The other thing to remind myself about and to bring to light for this conversation, if you like, is that these amends, and this might seem strange, and we go on to talk about it in this next paragraph, these amends are not about me. And what I mean by that is, I am here to play the role that he assigns me. The byproduct of me going out to make these amends is that things change for me too. But in the first instance, I am being of maximum service to God. That's the priority here. And as a result of taking the spiritual action, because it is a spiritual action to go out and approach somebody and to make that amends, in taking that spiritual action, that's when I start to change. That's when God keeps coming in and I am given more power, more strength, more direction, more guidance, all of that wonderful stuff. But I have to take this spiritual action, irrespective of the outcome. So here's where your willingness and your honesty and your open-mindedness comes into it too. Set aside every single thing you think you know. Because if you're going into making amends with somebody, for example, who have been in a previous relationship with, romantic relationship, sexual relationship or whatever, and you're wanting to get that back on track again, and your desire going into that amends is to rectify that situation and have that relationship put together, and that is your expectation, and it doesn't work out that way, because the other individual that you're making the amends to decides, no, that's not what's going to happen. You still have to take the spiritual action irrespective of the outcome. This is no longer about your expectations, my expectations, what I want to get out of the conversation. If you're going into these amends, and I made a few mistakes with this along the way, I wanted to rectify it. I wanted. If you're going in with any expectations about what you want other than making an amends, you're no longer in control of the outcome. That's not yours to own. All you've got to do is to take the spiritual action, irrespective of the outcome. It's one to sit with. It's one to ponder. It's one to percolate. It might not make sense. But the reality of it is, you made the decision that God is the director, that He is the principal, that you are His agent. You are a spearhead of God's ever-advancing creation. And if His creation means that you are not going to be with that person, then so be it. The spearhead of His advancing creation. There is no good, bad, or indifferent outcome of an amends. Do you know what I mean? An amends and the outcome is the spiritual outcome. The outcome's going to be what it's going to be. And as long as you follow these clear-cut directions, then you will stay on track. And the conversation will be what the conversation needs to be. You're in this prayerful exercise the whole way through this. Don't be mistaken about this. You ain't in control of the outcome. All you've got to do is take the action. And it might sound as if I'm repeating myself, but I'm trying to emphasize and re-emphasize the importance of this. So probably there's still some misgivings. There probably are some things that you don't want to have to do here. As we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we have heard, we may feel diffident about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. You might feel nervous about that. Diffident means you might be shy or you might lack confidence about it. But remember, you're not doing this by yourself. You might have a lack of confidence or a nervousness or a little bit of fear about going to your friends, your family, your business acquaintances, whoever's on your list. Especially on this spiritual basis. But they give some really clear directions about this that we must adhere to, that we must listen to, that we must experience. So you might be shy about that and going to them on a spiritual basis. But let us be reassured. This is where the first 100 that wrote this book give us the confidence. They want us to be successful, if that's the right word, through this process. They are encouraging us here, like they did on page 40, page 44. Cheer up. They want us to keep on moving forward like this. It's like on page 60, do not be discouraged. They're guiding us, they're directing us. So let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. Isn't that sensible? We're not going to rock up. Like, I'll give you the example. My sister, who I love dearly, is a huge part of my recovery. I ain't going to rock up with my sister on the first approach going into my amends with her to say, here, do you know what it is? I found this God thing. And let me tell you, He's wonderful, changed my life, and He's telling me what I should say to you. So you're going to sit there and you're going to listen to all my God stuff, sister. Even though I've wrecked your life and your family and your home over the last 30 years, you just sit there and listen to me because God is the thing. My sister would have opened the front door and kicked me back out onto the street, never to be seen again. So, not on our first approach. Why? Because we might prejudice them. They might think, oh my God, they've gone from one extreme to the other here. We might prejudice them. We don't know where they sit with this spiritual way of living. It's none of our business, and it's not for us to throw it down their throat. So the way that we approach is very, very important, and it tells us how one should do that. At the moment, I'm trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. This is a really, really important line. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Maximum service to God and the people about us. This is not about me. I have to fit myself to be, with God's help, of maximum service to God and the people about me. It's not about me trying to make myself God's woman in the way I think it should be. It's about God making me the woman He needs me to be. And there's a big difference in that. And that might sound a bit woo-woo, but that's how it is. I'm going into these conversations, asking God for the direction and the guidance for me to be the spearhead of His ever-advancing creation. Show me what I need to say. Tell me what I need to say. Help me with this conversation. Give me the willingness to make the amends to all of those people that I'm not so willing to yet. It's about me becoming God's person, fitting myself into the mold of where He would like me to be, not shaping things the way I want them to be, and no longer approaching you in a conversation to manipulate you to get out of you what I need for my greater good. This is powerful, life-changing stuff. So they go on to say, it is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we've gone all religious, like the example I've just given with my sister. Can you imagine? Oh my goodness me. And not just my sister, anyone else for that matter. My employer, who I've, caused all sorts of havoc at work. By the way, everything's okay. I found God. So everything's all right now. Really? Don't think so. There's a couple of things that we need to talk about. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. There's no point going into the ring and just saying, yeah, here we go. And then getting punched in the face and falling over, down for the count. That would be stupid. Why lay ourselves open to be branded fanatics or religious bores? Why? Why would we do that? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. Here's the thing. When I rock up at these amends with all of these people, I am a reflection of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a reflection of a 12-step recovery program. I'm a reflection of a 12-step program of action. If I'm going to somebody who I'm making an amends to, I don't know if they're potentially going to need a fellowship in the future, that a member of their family might need this fellowship in the future. Therefore, if I go into them and throw all of this God stuff at them, they'll be saying to people, no, you don't want to go to them. They're a cult. They're mad about this God thing. You don't want to be going there. You haven't got a God. You don't believe in God. You're agnostic. You're atheist. That's not the place for you to go to. No. What we want to do through this process is be the demonstration of how this process of going through the 12 steps with a sponsor is a program of action and is a program that has helped me recover to the extent that I am now able to come to you recovered and have this conversation with you. I'm a demonstration of this fellowship so that in the future, if that individual or any member of the family have somebody that is affected in the way that we were, they'll say, do you know what, I'm going to call MAGS or I'm going to call Laws. They have this message. They might be able to help. If I go in and over egg the whole fanatical thing, and throw this down people's throat, it'll put them off. It prevents me from carrying a beneficial message. Remember that whilst we're going out in any demonstration and interaction with people. And they give us some really crystal clear little tips, little hints, whatever you want to call them, as to how we should go about doing this. Because here's the thing, we want to carry a beneficial message. But the person that you're approaching, because you need to make the approach, that man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to right the wrong. Number one priority, you are going into that conversation with a sincere desire to right the wrong. Not to get what you want from the conversation, not to manipulate this person. A sincere desire to right the wrong. He's going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than in our talk of spiritual discoveries. It's that simple. When I approached my sister, I sat with her and I genuinely placed myself with her. And my opening line, I'll never forget it, was that I genuinely wanted to have this conversation, to put everything on the table, to do whatever I could within my gift to right everything that I had done wrong. And then I went quiet. And she talked. And she talked. And she talked. And for the first time in my life, I was given the power to stay quiet. And to listen. And to pause. I flinched in my seat. I bit the inside of my cheeks. I took deeper breaths. Whatever it was required to hear and listen honestly, with an open mind and willing to hear every single thing that she had to say. And that was only the first instruction. My desire to right the wrong. As we go through the next number of paragraphs, it gives us another couple of hints and tips and things to consider. This list of people that we're going to make an amends to is not a tick box exercise. I remember receiving an amends from someone and I felt like at the time that I was a tick box exercise. He took a piece of paper out of his wallet and there was a whole list of names on this piece of paper, and before he started talking to me, he put a tick beside my name. You can imagine. And he proceeded to tell me all sorts of everything and whatever. But you know what? That amends that was made to me was one of the greatest gifts that was ever given to me in my life. Because through that experience, I could see how to approach my amends. when I went out to make them. So you see, I've, in my life, through this program of action and through this program of recovery, have been given the opportunity to see and to truly experience and to truly come to believe that no matter what, everything in my life has happened for a reason. Some of it inexplicable, and I'm still working through. But even in what I thought was a disgraceful amends that was made to me, from a different perspective and a different thought process entirely, it was one of the best things that could have happened to me, because it's got me to be sitting here where I am today. Now, I know that might sound really and truly bizarre, but as I then started on my process, on my journey, and giving this away to other people, it helped me realize so much the importance of the genuine, authentic, sincere desire to right the wrong. It's a truly important part of this process. Next week, I'll share with you the amends that I made in the next paragraph about the man that I hated. But the approach is no different. I still approach him in a sincere desire to right the wrong. As we go through the rest of step 9, the thing to keep at the front of our mind is that as we're going out onto this journey, there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be concerned about. You're a different person. For anybody that hasn't gone through this process yet, when you get to this point, you're a different person from when you started out. You're given the direction, the power, the strength. You're given the words. This is all about the fact that you are now on a different trajectory, that you're taking this spiritual action irrespective of the outcome. And that is one of the most freeing things I've ever experienced in my entire life. Like step 4 and step 5, do not be afraid of this. Do not put the fear of God into the newcomer with regards to these steps. These are beautiful, freeing, amending steps that change your ability to have relationships with people, that change your ability to interact with this world, that change your outlook on people and the world entirely, where you will have the ability, like it says in those 5th step promises, to be alone at perfect peace and ease, to be able to look the world in the eye. You'll no longer have to cross the road when you see somebody that you've hurt. You'll no longer have to ignore the phone call when the number pops up on the phone. You'll no longer have to delete the friend request because you don't have the confidence to face these people. You will be able to see everybody in this world for the beautiful human beings that they are. You're no longer the victim. You're no longer the victim. And it's the most freeing experience. Honestly, step 8 and step 9 are golden, priceless. So I'll leave it for that.